Hello, I'm Mary Tahan. I'd like to thank the Latin American Antarctic historians for inviting me to speak at this 21st annual conference. It's my pleasure to make this presentation to you about the heroic sledge dogs of the South Pole Expedition. On December 14th, 2021, as we commemorate the 110th anniversary of humans reaching the geographic South Pole, we must not forget the 116 sled dogs who made this astounding human achievement possible. This paper portrays these sled dogs' accomplishments and contributions that made the Norwegian Antarctic Expedition of 1910 to 1912 a success. The paper is based upon my two books, Roald Amundsen's Sled Dogs, The Sledge Dogs Who Helped Discover the South Pole, and The Return of the South Pole Sled Dogs, with Amundsen's and Mawson's Antarctic Expeditions, which are the first books to trace and identify all 116 dogs. It was the hard-working sledge dogs who, 110 years ago, pulled Roald Amundsen and his expedition members across the southern ice and enabled Amundsen to become the very first human being to step foot on the southern axis of the Earth. And it was the dogs who, according to Amundsen's own diaries and testimonials, were the most important part of the Antarctic expedition. Without them, Amundsen might not have been the first to reach his coveted goal, and he might not have reached his goal at all. The importance of the dog's role and the significance of their accomplishments cannot be overstated. They were the key to the success of the South Pole expedition. Originally numbering 100, the polar dogs were purchased from the Royal Danish Greenland Trading Company in 1909 and transported in 1910 from Greenland to Norway via steamship during what proved to be a rough voyage. 3 casualties resulted in the dogs numbering 97 soon after arrival at the 17th century fortress ruins Frederiksholm on Flekkerøy Island near Kristiansand, where they remained on the island until they boarded the polar vessel Fram. They set sail for a 5-month roller coaster cruise across the equator and into the Southern Ocean, reaching Ross Sea and the Bay of Whales with additional puppies, having been fruitful and multiplied along the way, and arriving at the Great Ice Barrier and the edge of the Antarctic continent as 116 sled dogs in January 1911. There, they paved the way toward the discovery of the geographic South Pole. On the Antarctic ice, the dogs transported supplies in order to unload the ship, stockpiled seal meat for the men and themselves, established the vital depots for the South Pole journey, and build the winter camp Framheim. Driven hard and sometimes fed only half a kilo of pemmican per day, they performed 3 crucial depot tours that laid down 3 tons of provisions at 80 degrees south, 81 degrees south, and 82 degrees south for the South Pole journey. These depot tours caused them much suffering and claimed the lives of many of the dogs. After a disastrous early start for the pole that caused casualties among the dogs and nearly among some of the men, 52 dogs began the actual South Pole trek. The dogs pulled heavily laden sledges that weighed approximately 400 kilograms each. They climbed glaciers and high mountains whose peaks reached almost 15,000 feet. They ascended the polar plateau and its lofty height of nearly 11,000 feet. They crossed over bottomless abysses and deep crevasses that had previously swallowed their comrades. And they several times saved the men's lives. Theirs was a stellar performance and superior accomplishment, a true human-animal interconnection. It was an example of cooperation between loyal animals and driven humans. But their reward was not always a reciprocation of that loyalty or an offering of a morsel of pemmican or seal meat. Many times, it was the meat of their dead brethren, slaughtered for exhibiting exhaustion or pregnancy, or deliberately killed to reduce the number of dogs as the party progressed south, that they were given to line their empty stomachs. Over half of the dogs were intentionally killed after they had made the Herculean effort of pulling the men and their supplies onto the polar plateau. And a few of those were eaten by the men, not out of necessity, but for a change of menu, a change of taste. The remaining 18 dogs led the 5 men on the final stretch toward the pole. They pulled their men to their goal. 17 dogs actually arrived at the South Pole. 16 dogs began the return journey from it, and 11 dogs actually returned from the pole. They had managed to complete a grueling round trip of 1,860 miles over an intense 99 days at the end of the earth. All the dogs were heroic, but their heroism was often rewarded with brutal and unrelenting extreme work, starvation, and death. Throughout the expedition in Antarctica, the dogs provided a reliable mode of transportation and pulling power. But they also provided comfort to the men in their companionship, their never-ending good humor, and their interesting characteristics. They were family. They were children. They were friends who made Antarctica seem like home to Amundsen and his men. Each of these sled dogs had a name, had their own unique personality, had friends and family and partners, and had a history of achievements. Each contributed in their own way. Medius and Ring were natural-born leaders who ran at the head of Helmer Hansen's team, leading the entire expedition to the South Pole. Mikkel, Raven, Elsa, and Masmas saved their team driver Sverre Hassel and fellow expeditioner Hjalmar Johansen from driving off the edge of an ice cliff and plunging to their deaths. Fix, Lasse, and Snuppesen guided Amundsen during the dark days of the Antarctic winter. Fisken, Fridtjof, and Jola served bravely on Olav Bjaaland's team, crossing many a deep and frightening crevasse. Sugen, Arne, and Oberstan pulled valiantly on Oscar Wisting's team, sailing over the ice. And puppies Funko, Madero, Camillo, and Lucy provided the men with entertainment and amusement to no end, boosting morale and bolstering mental health, both on the ship and on the Antarctic continent. Their names should be remembered and their actions memorialized. All 116 dogs are named, identified, traced, and documented for the very first time in my books, and their achievements and contributions to the discovery mission are carefully recounted, as is fitting to these heroes, these canine explorers. Of the 39 dogs who returned from Antarctica, almost unbelievably, 21 joined the Douglas Mawson Australasian Antarctic Expedition of 1911 to 1914 for another tour of duty in the ice. There, half of the dogs, sadly, were killed by the men as the Australian expedition was stranded for a second winter in Antarctica, while the remaining half provided companionship during the long winter solitude, as well as provided pulling power during the scientific springtime sledging. The other 18 dogs, who included the 11 who had been to and returned from the South Pole, also as identified in my books, went on to Argentina, where a few of them were given to Peter Don Pedro Christophersen, who was an important patron and benefactor of Amundsen. The dogs were highly valued and thus served as valuable gifts of thanks and appreciation. They were gifted to the family of Don Pedro Christophersen, who had financially saved Amundsen's expedition. Sadly, though, the dogs could not withstand their new environment, and a few of the puppies died of illness. The rest of the dogs were exhibited at the Buenos Aires Zoological Gardens, where, unfortunately, most of them died. A deadly virus that circulated in the air of the Buenos Aires Zoo did to them what the harsh seas, tropical heat, and Antarctic ice could not do. It proved to be the end of these heroic and strong dogs. Loyal to the end they were. The 3 dogs who ultimately survived this day in Argentina traveled back to Norway and were given a hero's welcome with a veritable parade through Christiania. An impromptu following of children and adults who were mesmerized by the South Pole expedition dogs. It was a welcomed recognition that all 116 sled dogs would have deserved. 2 of the surviving dogs went on to save human lives in the Arctic. They say that every dog must have his day. And in my books, as well as in this presentation, these dogs are given their due credit. For without them, this great human achievement would not have been accomplished. Their names are forever entrenched in our memories. Rapp, Hai, Kaisa, Gvan, Jens, Ola, Thor, Pan, Lucy, Neptune, Urua, Helga, Camilla, and all the rest. These dogs helped our species progress in our polar exploration. They helped us open a portal to the final undiscovered place on Earth. And they did so willingly and selflessly. Their achievement must forever be noted in our history. Thank you.